We ended that first video with prostate cancer, but I do want to point out that testicular cancer is extremely important and aggressive in young men, and men should be examining their testicles. They can feel any lump on their testicles, just the way women should be doing a BSE, breast self-exams, regularly to feel for lumps whatsoever. Lance Armstrong had testicular cancer. Again, this FSH is a follicle stimulating hormone in men and women from the pituitary, and that stimulates meiosis. What is not an action of testosterone? Again, we don't need to know that. So we're done with the male reproductive system, and we've got to work on the female reproductive system. The body parts are a whole lot easier. However, what takes place hormonally is not so easy. So the reproductive tract consists of the uterine tubes. There's 3 names for these uterine tubes: fallopian tube, oviduct, and uterine tube. And they'll go from the uterus, see how deep in the pelvis this uterus is, from the uterus and curve around and not actually touch the ovaries. There's a space between the ovaries and the uterine tubes. So the vagina, the uterus, and the uterine tubes. Mammary glands will become important. The gonads are the ovaries, and the external genitalia consists of the clitoris, the vestibule, and the labia. Labia majora and labia minora. So here is a midsagittal view. So you should be able to identify body parts in the midsagittal view as well as a frontal view of the female reproductive system. So you will notice here that there are 3 openings in the perineal area of the woman. And you've got to be able to know what these openings go to. So the first opening is the urethra going to the urinary bladder. The middle opening is the vagina going to the uterus, and the last opening is the anus going to the colon. Again, this uterus is quite deep in the pelvis. You don't need to know the names of any of these ligaments, but they're ligaments that are going to hold the ovary in position. The largest is that broad ligament. See this broad ligament here that attaches to the uterine tube and the uterus. There's a suspensory ligament. Again, too much detail. This is kind of a nice view of the cervix. So this is the end of the vagina, and as the doctor is doing a pap smear, he will see this cervical opening, and it will look nice and round if you have never had a baby. If you've had a baby, it has stretched out to allow the passage of that infant, and so it has a different shape. So never lie to your doctor about whether you've had a kid or not. So here's our uterus. Here are the uterine tubes. At the end of the uterine tubes are finger-like projections called fimbriae, and they will engorge with blood and sway, so that when an egg is ovulated from the ovary, these are larger. The fimbriae kind of catch it like a catcher's mitt. That's the hope anyway. Like the testes in the male fetus, the ovaries develop from internal tissue near the kidney, and they descend. The ovary can be divided into the inner medulla and outer cortex. The medulla is loose connective tissue, blood vessels, nerves. The cortex looks granular because it has these tiny masses of cells called ovarian follicles. Here is the ovary, but this ovary is showing you what takes place over a 28-day cycle. So this would be the beginning. Here is a follicle with an immature ovum inside it, and the follicle matures and develops. Here would be day 14, where the egg is ovulated, and then that follicle turns yellow and it becomes what is called a corpus luteum. They saw this in cows, so they called it corpus luteum. It is the kind of degenerating follicle, but if a woman becomes pregnant, it becomes a gland and starts secreting hormones. Kind of like the male, the development of the egg and all the names, the oogonia, the oocytes, is too much. We don't need all those different terms. The name of egg formation is oogenesis, just like the name of sperm formation was spermatogenesis. So the follicle will mature. Actually, every month, many follicles begin to mature, and one will outpace the others. FSH is follicle stimulating hormone from the pituitary, and that causes the follicles to mature. So this shows ovulation. Here is the secondary oocyte, its name when it's ovulated. Meiosis has not been completed at this time. Meiosis will not be completed until the egg is fertilized. Too much detail. We don't need to know the details of meiosis. One difference here between women and men. Men, at the end of meiosis, men have 4 sperm. At the end of meiosis, women have 1 large ovum and 4 polar bodies. So what happens every time there's a division, the cytoplasm is kind of captured by this one cell so that the egg is very large. And then those polar bodies degenerate. Here's the ovary over a 28-day cycle. So you can see over time, if you follow it around in a counterclockwise direction, at day 14, the follicle would release the ovary. A lot of women feel this as a sharp ping. And remember, this is very deep in your hips as that ovum is released. The follicle becomes the corpus luteum and degenerates, finally become the corpus albicans, the white body, from the yellow body to the white body. So over a month's time, the ovaries undergo changes. The ovarian cycle involves changes in those follicles. At birth, a woman has, a baby has 2 million follicles. By puberty, there's about 400,000 follicles left, and each month 10, 12, 20 are stimulated to develop. And this is going to be a lot of detail. When that egg is released, it's surrounded by this corona radiata that develops when the egg is in the follicle, and it's a protective coating for that egg. The acrosome cap on the sperm have to eat through that coating to get through. So again, you need to know the different body parts here. I don't think this picture is very good. Well, I don't know if I can't remember if there's another picture later on, but the external lips are the labia majora, And the internal mucous membrane lips are the labia minora. And then anterior to the urethra will be the clitoris, which is the only structure on the human body, male or female, that is purely for pleasure. This is showing just the blood, the ligaments. The uterine tube, remember it's got 3 names, uterine tube, oviduct, and fallopian tube, has got cilia to move that egg along. This has got different layers, of course it does. The outer layer is the perimetrium, the middle muscular layer is the myometrium, and the innermost lining that changes with the menstrual cycle is called the endometrium. And that is where the developing embryo will embed. That is where it must be to grow successfully. The uterus can change size and shape. The embryo is weeks 1 through 8. Week 9 is called the fetus. And contraction of the myometrium, the muscular wall, is important for delivery. The vagina itself is a muscular tube, and it's ridged. Now, when a woman ovulates, the cervix produces mucus, and so the mucus travels down here. So Catholics can't use forms of birth control, so they can use the method of temperature, but also a woman can feel that mucus during ovulation outside her vagina, in the vestibule outside the vagina. And what actually happens is the sperm, I've seen a video of it, the sperm can actually swim up that mucus. It's almost like a highway to the cervix. Oh, forgot about the hymen. So when girls are born, they often have some tissue covering the vagina, the opening of the vagina. It's not real acidic when she's born, and it needs protection from the external environment. And there are all kinds of hymens. Many girls break their hymen using tampons or riding bicycles. The female external genitalia is called the vulva or pudendum, and this consists of the vestibule, which is kind of the opening just outside the vagina, and that's surrounded by the labia minora, and inside are glands that will keep the vestibule moist, the vestibular glands, and then other glands are going to produce mucus to reduce friction during sexual arousal. And those are both in the vestibule. And then the mons pubis, let's see, here's the mons pubis. It's kind of a fatty pad here, covered with hair. And here is the clitoris. It's also covered with the foreskin or prepuce called the hood, kind of like a protection for it. This is showing a torn hymen, the entrance to the vagina, the labia minora, and the labia majora. I don't think there's anything else there. And if you want to read more information about the functions of the female reproductive organ.